Happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 369 for February the 11th, 2026. My name is Wes Fryer, and I'm coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am a middle school media literacy and STEM teacher, and I am being joined, as always, across the fiber network that we just adore now because it lets us hang out as we are pretty much once a week. It's Jason Neiffer from Missoula, Montana, and I understand things are a little warm there in Missoula, Jason. So that's a little odd for mid-February, early February.
Yeah, totally. We really wish we could have some winter up here. And it's funny because I think I maybe mentioned this last week. We broadcast last week, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That I had gone to Boston for a very short trip, and I expected to be cool. It's next to the ocean, but it's freezing there, and I'm glad that I had multiple layers. And I come back to Missoula, and it was totally warm. And yeah, the problem with winter, we would not complain about a mild winter. I know, I guess our skiers would complain about a mild winter here, but I wouldn't complain about a mild winter, except that lately that means an on fire summer. So literally on fire summer. So yeah, it's a little rough. But we're keeping an eye on things. My understanding is the snowpack up in the mountains is actually in pretty good shape, but lower mountain snowpack is abysmal, and that could mean a pretty rough spring and summer.
Wow. Well, we are going to talk tonight about some artificial intelligence, but I'm sure we'll talk about some other stuff as well. Do you want to kind of give a rundown of what it is we're going to do and what are our topics tonight?
Mostly Dr. Fryer, but Dr. Fryer and I have put together a list of interesting articles from the last couple of weeks, and we're going to shoot them through the EdTech prism and see if we can help get some insights for our listeners and viewers. As always, if you're listening to this after the fact, we do broadcast Wednesday nights live at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And hey, and if you're in Europe, it's the middle of the night, so you're really partying with us tonight. So feel free to hop in and comment as you like. But tonight, we definitely have AI articles. We have some social media articles, some privacy articles, a miscellaneous article, and then we'll end tonight with our Geeks of the Week. Dr. Fryer, you did the bulk of our research for tonight's show. I certainly would love to talk about Claude at some point, but where would you like to start tonight?
I want to start with a very unusual one. I did put it under AI and under the bad actors category. But have you tracked about this Archive Today situation?
No.
This is really, really bizarre. So this is an Ars Technica article, and then I've got a follow-up link to the actual website that is involved in this denial of service attack. But this is from Ars Technica today on February 10th. And the headline is Archive.today, CAPTCHA page executes DDoS, Wikipedia considers banning the site. And this is kind of a wild tale, which does involve some different media literacy and talking about, stuff. So first off, let's talk about Archive Today. Archive.today, which I use as archive.ph, is actually a shadowy website that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is attempting to unmask because the owner is not known to the public, and some folks do not like the site because it allows not only the archiving of a website like you have with the Wayback Machine for the Internet Archive, but it also allows for the bypass of paywalls. So not for every single website, but for a number of websites like news websites, you can simply plug your link in here and into archive.ph, archive.today, and you're going to be able to see it as if you're a subscriber. Well, the article reveals that the owner of a blog, and I'll go ahead and put the link to that blog. It's called Gyro Vague. And when you go to, let me just go ahead and share it. We've been sharing some screencasts. This will not be as exciting as Dr. Neiffer's claw demo coming up here in a second. Oh, you know what? This is interesting. I thought I had done this. I'm using my Vivaldi browser, and I'm going to have to. Maybe it will work. Can you see that? Ah, it works.
Yep, there we go.
All right, so here's the website, and it says archive.today is directing a DDoS attack against my blog. This blogger goes ahead and tells this whole story that back in January, they essentially posted an investigative blogger, we would say investigative journalist report about Archive Today, trying to unmask who that person is. And because this link actually got mentioned in the FBI's information and some other news, now when you visit the website, and here's the thing, Wikipedia has used this just like they've used the Internet Archive to create backups of websites, and sometimes to provide a link to a site. Sometimes it'll go down. They show the code, and so there's a CAPTCHA that when it's open is actually pinging this blog in a denial of service attack. And so they go through this whole thing. Back in August of 2023, the author of this blog shared a post that is still online on the trail of the mysterious guerrilla archivist of the internet, archive.today. And they use these, techniques and tools basically to use search engines and try to, find out about the tech stack and the funding. And they're trying to unmask the owner of archive.today. And so it goes through all of this and how, basically in January, this denial of service attack happened. And so the reason why Wikipedia is involved is because Wikipedians have been using archive.today as they have the Internet Archive, but that's controversial because the FBI is trying to unmask this company. There are people that consider this to be unethical / illegal. And so there's this debate among Wikipedians of whether or not this should be permitted. Maybe they should just drop, especially since there's this DDoS attack, which, in and of itself, that's a good thing to talk about and have people aware of what a denial of service attack is. And that's a whole lot of orchestrated pings or accesses, basically trying to flood someone's website with a bunch of requests that's going to cause other people to not be able to access their site. So I thought that was a crazy story. Yeah, and wild. I will admit, I guess here on the record, because we're being recorded, I use archive.today. I read a number of articles, and our school subscribes to some news sites, and I have some subscriptions, but I don't subscribe to every news site, and I do use the site, and I'm thankful for it. But this is definitely a shady, not good thing. I mean, I'd be shocked if the Internet Archive would do this, and I hadn't heard this at all. This is just kind of a rabbit hole of things that possibly not everybody, is tracking with, just in terms of, what is a DDoS attack? What is archive.today? And, how is Wikipedia involved? So the Wikipedians are debating this. They have not resolved it yet, but evidently the attack is ongoing. So, Dr. Neifer, your response.
Well, I mean, it's funny, and actually, I think we should pivot to your Wikimedia article after this. It's kind of related, but I mean, I do think I love the Wikipedia. I mean, there's a variety of reasons why I like the Wikipedia, but one of the things that I think is always really interesting is that because they're very community minded, they're very thoughtful about what they're doing and what their processes are, because they realize there's such a behemoth right now in the information space that decisions they make can have wide ramifications. So be curious in what direction they go into. But the comment I wanted to make was about, I get that sites, need either advertising or your subscriptions to survive. I'm very conscious of that for sure. But I also feel like that we still need a system where it's easy to do some kind of micro payment for access to an article. I feel like if we had done this 25 years ago, that most media companies would be in much better shape now. But you can imagine for a moment, some kind of third-party site. PayPal could have done this 25 years ago to say that you just click a button and then confirm with a password, and you pay 14 cents for access to this article. And I could see very easily paying for high-quality journalism that way. But I am a subscriber right now to Apple News, which is worth the $20 a month for me because
Really? I did not know
access.
that.
Yeah, what I would say is that because they get access to so many newspapers that you get for free as part of that subscription, and a number of magazines as well. It's actually
Wow.
pretty great when I travel, because I like a good magazine when I'm on an airplane. But I can't afford, subscription to the Atlantic, and the specific subscription to the New Yorker, and subscription to this, and subscription to that. And I love, reading a diversity of sources, but it is a real problem, that there's no means to do that. And I do feel like we'd be in better media shape if we could go in that direction. And also at the same time, we've had the discussion in the past about ad blockers, right? Like I get the reason why that there are ethical questions about it, because you are essentially blocking what is paying for the service. But also, without access to those tools, sometimes those websites are unreadable, right?
Oh
Or
gosh, it's
you know,
crazy
yeah,
sometimes for me to see the version of a page that my students watch or look at, and then the one that I'm viewing. It's
yeah,
just shocking.
yeah. And I totally agree. And in fact, um, we used to advise our students that to diminish the cognitive load when you're reading external websites, make sure you have, and I'm not sure if any of these even work anymore, the reader extensions in Chrome, where it would strip everything but the text itself.
Yeah.
But it's a huge issue, right?
I need to write a blog post about it, but I might have mentioned Vivaldi. Have I talked about the Vivaldi browser? I don't
I
think
think you
I've.
mentioned a couple
I,
times, but I'm
I
not
need
sure
to probably
how.
do a
Yeah,
formal geek of the week of it, but I'm using it. It's a privacy first European browser, and I don't see any ads on YouTube now because I use Vivaldi on my iOS device. Well, let me follow up. I'll get to the Wikimedia article. Did you hear the CIA fact book was killed?
I did hear that, and that
Okay.
makes me very sad, actually.
Yeah, so this is related. So there's a number of articles. I just looked at Google News, and I'm going to pull one that doesn't have a paywall because actually, to your point about Apple News, I should try it, but I'm irritated when Apple wants to lock people out, especially when it comes to news, and I want to share links, and so
Yeah.
that's been the reason I've steered clear of it. But hey, folks, if Jason Neifert subscribes to a service, it very well could be worth checking out. Let's just say that for the record. So anyway, I grabbed this NPR article from February 7th, and it's titled "The CIA World Fact Book is Dead. Here's How I Came to Love It." And, if you're not familiar with it, I think probably Jason and I might be familiar with it because of debate. The CIA World Fact Book's been around a long time. It actually started off as a classified resource, and then it became declassified. So, the article that I was another article that I had seen about this earlier. And by the way, isn't this interesting? How do you see headlines? It all depends upon who you follow, when you might open up your feed of whatever app this is or whatever network it is, and then who's sharing what. But it was a classified Cold War document, and then it got declassified, and it has, become something that not only folks in the United States but around the world have turned to as a quote unquote reliable source to learn about different countries and specifically about their governments and whether they're respecting democratic processes and things like that. So the other article that had to do with Wikipedia is from the Wikimedia United Kingdom website, and it's called "Why Wikimedia Belongs in Education." It's from February 8th, and it's by Dr. Sally Latham, who is the education lead at Wikimedia UK, obviously not an unbiased source. And I think we should acknowledge today that, we definitely have quote unquote bias, and some people would call it censorship, others would call it moderation, happening on Wikipedia. I have been a huge fan of Wikipedia for years, and part of the reason why I respect them so much is because of the transparent and effective processes that they use in order to hash out these debates about what is the fact or what is the verifiable information about a particular topic and a particular subject. And so this article talks about how education continues to change in the digital age, and we have a digital divide, and how we need to uh, basically teach media literacy, and that Wikipedia can be a very powerful tool used in the classroom. Number one, it has the goal of providing free access to the sum of human knowledge, which sounds really big, but that is what Wikipedia and Wikimedia have done for over 2 decades. And so many websites have come and gone, and there's a real vibrant community that is around Wikipedia. And so she's making the case that it should be used in the classroom. There's a role that Wikimedia UK plays as far as critical evaluation. And we've said this before, critical thinking is not a partisan issue. That's like what education is about. Education is not about just memorizing facts. It's about learning to think, and it's about learning how to vet sources and determine what it is you're going to consider credible and believable. So, yes, there's a lot of love here on the show, I think, for Wikipedia, but also just for critical thinking. And when you look at the sources that the Wikipedians consider to be authoritative, like in today's culture war, that is contentious because not everybody's going to agree on a set of news sources. But it is a transparent process in that you can see what is allowed and what's not. Some people are angry, like Elon, right? Elon Musk has started the quote Grokpedia so that he can have his own version of the truth. And there are very different versions of things like the January 6th insurrection in Washington, D.C. and things like that are covered. But I like this advocacy for Wikipedia, and I think it's fascinating to see how things continue to be hashed out. I lament the demise of the CIA fact book, and I think we need to continue to advocate for our students and teachers, but everybody in our society, to try to have good access and open access to a variety of perspectives, and especially ones that are transparent in the ways that they present information. And we need to grapple with this stuff, in the classroom, in school, and in other forums that we have to talk about learning media literacy, news, facts, these things that are really important to us.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I was sad to see the CIA Wolf Fact Book go away too. It was a critical part of my geography classes because it was an easy place to send students to look up basic information. And it was also a frequent flyer in extemp prep boxes for those that recognize the competitive speech event. But if nothing else, every time we lose another fairly authoritative source, right, it just makes it that much more difficult for us, I think, to teach media literacy. And to your points about Wikipedia, one of the things I really love to do is go on to the discussion tab in an article, especially a controversial one, and see
The
how
top
people
page.
argue about it. It's such an important part of the process, and more importantly, you can get a sense of why something is controversial, which is in itself is a critical thinking exercise, right?
100%.
And we've talked about this one a ton, and it's one of my favorite things to say about search. But search has never been an information gathering a piece. It's a critical thinking piece, because you have to, if you're not willing to look and compare and find kind of different pieces around that process, you will be quickly buried in and I blocked myself off with my own sentence structure. You will quickly lose the ability to find facts, because the bottom line is that even a strongly respected, a logarithmically based search engine is not always going to give you the information you're looking for, even on the first page. That's what Google hopes to do, right? But we know that's not the case.
And Jason, you are very much in and within the circuit, so to speak, of EdTech and AI conferences and educational conferences and professional development than I am at this point. But I know that back in the day, not very long ago, people like Alan November were going all over the place teaching folks how to use search engines and how to use different kinds of syntax and queries. And it was about critical thinking, but applying a little digital savvy and some tools and techniques in order to look at how that information is presented and decide what it is you're going to use, and making the case that this is foundational for us to do today, because literacy involves accessing information and also vetting sources. And so we're not using the Alta Vista search engine. We are still using Google, but we are facing AI overviews. And I think a very strong case can be made that, in every classroom, we need to be talking about these issues. And even if you're using some other kind of vetted search engine today, and I know I've recommended these to some of our primary teachers, back in the day as a tech director, and it just, there's a whole lot of different sites that you can use. By the way, I'm using Startpage. Do you use Startpage, Jason?
It's funny. I just downloaded Vivaldi for the first time in a couple of years because I'm curious, and that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, Startpage uses Google search results, but it provides them algorithm free in terms of tracking and stuff like that, which I don't think is going to revolutionize my life today. But anyway, these tools are worth trying. If you're watching the show, there's a chance you're an early adapter innovator when it comes to tech. And many times, I think early adapter innovators, we can be guilty of being overly excited about tech and all of that kind of stuff. But we also end up figuring stuff out that eventually becomes mainstream. And I 100% think that this media literacy bandwagon, and what we're talking about specifically now, search and vetting sources, and how do we not only, because it's not as hard to find the information today, right? But to decide whether that information is accurate, and even to just unmask, as this article was talking about with archive.today, unmasking the source. Where did it come from? And is that source biased? And what kind of bias might they have? And how does that source, we laterally read, how does that source compare to other sources? And what do other sources say about that source? All of that. I wish it was simpler, right? I do, but it's not. And AI is such a huge part of this puzzle. So I think that article, which, has taken 20 minutes of our show, but it's freaking awesome because it dives into a lot of issues and some really good conversations that I think we can have with our students, but we should be having with whoever it is we talk to, because these issues are relevant to all of us when it comes to paywalls and information and being able to vet. You have any other Jedi tricks you're using when it comes to this idea of searching and dealing with the AI overview? And because I wrote a post this week, in fact, called "Digital Defense Against the Dark Arts." And
I will say, I don't mind the AI overviews. I know a lot of people are grossed out by them. I don't mind them. I just don't rely on them in most cases, because I feel like, in fact, I've seen it. When I'm going to search for something that I have enough information on that I can quickly evaluate it, it gets it wrong a lot. And and the stuff I'm looking up on Google is typically technical. How do you get this app to work, or when's the last version of this, or what open source project is this other one based on, that kind of stuff. And you're not getting I don't know what Google's doing in regards to the AI overviews. I'm assuming that it's doing the best search it can based on its own knowledge of itself, right?
A quick sort of deep research, but not deep research. They don't want too many tokens and too much energy and all that to be, taken for every Google search. But yeah,
Yeah.
they're optimizing for the best result they can using their AI tools, but not using too many resources. That would
Yeah.
be Wes's outsider guess.
Well, and anymore too, like if I'm like seriously working on something like a topic or a deeper research piece, what I would probably more likely do now is go in and have um, Google do a deep research for me in Gemini. And I mean, I'm not talking about finding out when the concert is next Tuesday or that kind of stuff. But I'm talking about something I'm working deeply in. I probably would do a deep research report to start off with, and then use that as a guide to finding sources that can give me the insights that I'm looking for. And actually, in fact, I've that's been a very successful strategy for me. And as an example of that, one of the things that I've used deep research for a couple of times now in Gemini is to come up with product guides for me. That if I'm looking for a piece of software, for example, and I can't remember, no, I can remember, as a matter of fact, I was looking for the best inexpensive or open source or one-time pay PDF reader and modifier for Windows 11. It put together a really great list of software. And my prompting strategy there is to ask for professional and also user reviews, and so it gives me a pretty comprehensive look at that, and that's been very successful for me. Comparing brand names, or trying to think what else I've done with it. Pulling restaurant reviews for the restaurants within 5 blocks of this place I'm staying in downtown wherever. Go back and look at, and here's the kinds of food I like to eat, and it pulls all the relevant reviews, both professionally and user reviews from places like Yelp, and that's that's saving me a lot of searches to start with, but also I can't go 45 pages deep into Google to find a restaurant review from the local newspaper, right?
Sure.
But AI is better at that, especially for those kind of ad hoc searches.
And for EdTech's tools, that's how I found Descript. This book thing that I've been working on for a decade and not getting done has a podcasting chapter, and that's how I found it. I had used an AI tool. This was probably over a year ago, and I'd said, "Hey, this is my chapter on podcasting. Take a look at this. Anything I'm leaving out?" And I think at the time it was ChatGPT. "Oh, well, you definitely need to tell people about Descript." And I'm like, well, what the heck is that? I've never heard of it. And it's turned out to be a life-changing, and I do subscribe to it monthly, tool that I use to edit both podcasts and video. Jason, I'm going to drop the link to LM Arena, which is now arena.ai, because not only is it good to know about this, because I was asked today, hey, what's the best, AI platform when you use the most? And I said, well, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, certainly for images, I'm using Gemini and Nano Banana, and I'm going to talk about this in the Geek of the Week, actually. But I wonder, and this is a lesson I think I'm going to do this with my students, having them take a curated prompt, and maybe a prompt that they have actually enhanced with an AI tool, but then seeing the difference in results that they get. Because I think this is really important. It's really important to recognize, depending on the tool that you use, you can get different results. And sometimes that might be very slight, but in other cases, it could be very significant, like even in terms of like whether something is a fact or not. And that might be a cool thing, if anybody out there is looking for a media literacy project to collaborate with, like to have as far as prompts, right? What are some prompts? And the thing is, the results are going to change day to day. Are the guardrails for your Gemini on your school Google workplace account set up differently than mine, than the consumer account? The models are always changing. But like for this moment, for today, for the access that you have, would be really interesting to find like basically certain prompts. Remember, what was it? The Northwest tree octopus. There were different searches that we would have people do back in the day to vet whether something was true or not. And you could have your kids do them. And that would be an interesting thing to see what kinds of prompts are fruitful for revealing some of these differences between search engine results, especially when it comes to substantive differences in the factual presentation of information.
Yeah, totally. And I would also say too that um, it's just going to grow more complex, right? And so the more we can engage students in these critical discussions, so that they know that they know knowledge is not static and becoming less static by the day, right? That it's a perfectly important time to double down on that in all of our educational
That's
environments.
probably your alarm, Jason, telling Wes to be silent and let Jason start his demos. Would that be the
Yeah, my
alarm?
my phone just really wanted to hear me talk, so that I think you nailed it. And thanks for mentioning Ella Marina. I think that's such a wonderful site, and it serves a great purpose, right? It helps judge models, which I think is a very useful service. But it's also one of the places that I recommend the people that really want to explore what the different models spit back. In fact, I almost put this article in the notes tonight. Perplexity just announced a new feature, and I must admit that I'm not a paying member of Perplexity anymore. I had to call the herd on AI tools, and that didn't make the cut.
Did
But
your spouse ever ask you how many subscriptions you have, Jason?
no, she doesn't. But she also will say things like, "I trust you not to buy things that you don't use." And that's pretty effective at guilting me into canceling things. But the Perplexity is using a new system where it has a master model that uses all the other models as kind of differentiating agents, so that it tries to find the best answers between all the models. It kind of reminds me of Dogpile 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Or Metacrawler, right?
There's a discriminator. Tell me what Dogpile was.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny too, because I'm starting to get to the point where teachers I'm talking to in their 20s and 30s have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to the early internet. I'm like, wow, I'm old. But the I thought that was really interesting. But I also think that there's a lot of utility in seeing how different the models spit things out, right? And to be totally clear, like Arena AI is not a oh my lord, that is a blast from the past. The
Arena AI.
the Arena, thank you. I wouldn't put anything secure in Arena. Like, in fact, they even say we're training off your stuff. That's part of why we're offering the service. But um, it's just such a great way to determine how different models react to different prompts, and I think it's a really interesting metacognitive exercise.
So LM Arena would be a good platform to use for exactly what I was just talking about then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Good. Okay, sir. I think you might have a demo or two. Do you want to do some articles first, or you want to jump into demos, or what's your
Let me jump into a quick demo here. I want to talk about Claude. And are you a paying Claude customer, Wes?
Indeed, I am. I
Yeah.
stopped about over a month ago paying for ChatGPT, and I'm still paying for Gemini because we're the Google One family, and it comes with. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've been paying, and I'm shying away from Claude Code because I used my token so fast, and so I'm doing most of my vibe coding with just that thinking model of whatever that middle one is.
Yeah. Yeah. So interestingly enough, what I want to show off tonight is related to Claude Code, and I also don't use Claude Code all that much. In part because, well, first of all, it's a mental rabbit hole for me for sure, but also, Claude is not a cheap product, right? And you do use up your allotment of tokens pretty easily. But they announced co-work a couple of weeks ago, maybe like late December, and I just didn't have time to play with it at all. And then I've played with it a lot in the last week and have discovered some really extraordinary functionality in it. And I still think it's the little things that AI doesn't get enough credit for. That there are some truly productive things you can do with AI tools that I think are pretty amazing. But this is the Claude desktop on Mac. The article I did drop in the notes was that they announced that it's now available for Windows with full feature parity. So if you're a Windows person, you can now do co-work on Windows as well. But and this is a live demo. Like, I haven't done this before. So a couple of examples. The other night, my wife had me help her with a little tech project. Her dad had scanned a bunch of pages that were PDFs of a family history that he wanted to share with a family member. And I can't remember if it was like 27, 28 pages, but they were all separate PDFs, and he wanted them in a single PDF. And so I had the ability to do that on my Mac really easily. But then I put them together and they were out of order, and it was a pain to look at. Like, it was going to be like a 20, 30-minute project just to organize this PDF. So I stuck all of the PDFs in a folder and pointed the co-work folder towards that folder. And I said, please turn this into a single PDF, but also confirm that the pages are in the right order. And the reason why it stunned me was that these were handwritten page numbers on the PDFs, right? And it was 30 different PDFs. It took about a minute and a half. It created a PDF for me, and the pages were in the right order. And it even went through a process where it first looked at the date stamp, or a date and time stamp on the PDF. And it said, let me check this another way. And so it looked at the page numbers on the page and said, oh, these weren't scanned in the right order. So it reorganized the pages by handwritten page number, right? Which is just wild. But the way this works is that you can add plugins to do different things with Claude Cowork. I am 100% certain that I've barely scratched the surface, but what I did is I downloaded from Dropbox my old World Cultures folder. This is the last time I taught World Cultures in 2009, 2010. And it's a mess, because that's the way my files were at the time, was generally a mess in Dropbox. And I'm going to see if I can get it to reorganize this folder for me.
You should write a book, Jason, Teaching with Dropbox.
Yeah,
Teaching with Dropbox and Dogpile.
The Jason Knifer story. So I've got to point into this, and I'm going to be like, hey, let's organize this folder. Any ideas? And you'll notice here that I am using also the quickest model here, Haiku.
Now, you've pointed to a folder on your computer instead of uploading stuff.
Right, yeah. So you can see here, this is World Cultures, which is a folder sitting on my desktop that I unzipped from Dropbox download.
And you've sort of poked a hole. You've allowed the AI to have access to that folder on your local machine.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And in fact, it asks for my permission, right? Once it sees the folder, may I access and make changes to this folder? And the answer, you can always allow that in that particular folder, but I'm still mostly this time kind of guy, right?
And you can also duplicate the folder before you do this, so that you are working on a duplicate rather than the original, which is probably
that's exactly the case, right? That's a really good point. And I still don't know if I'm ever going to need my 15, 16-year-old world geography stuff ever again. The last time I shared it with a new teacher, she said it was interesting but pretty dated. So there you go. But
well, of course, I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah, totally, right. So I'm gonna just see what it does now. And so you'll notice on the right hand side here that it's pointing towards my World Cultures folder. I'm happy to help structure this. Before I suggest anything, let me understand what you're working with and why, what would actually be useful for your work. A couple of questions: what's currently in there? What's the current folder's primary function? And then I'm going to go ahead and ask me ask me these questions one at a time, please. Got it. Let's start here. What's currently in the folder? A mix. This is the folder for my world cultures class the last time I taught it.
You missed class. First class. There you go.
Thank you.
This is podcasting at its finest, folks.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah,
Jason
watching me type.
And Wes edits his typing. It's really exciting.
Okay, so it's class materials from when you taught world cultures. What do you want to do with this folder now? Are you archiving it, setting it up to teach again, pulling materials to reuse, or building a reference library or something else? I am teaching this in the fall and would like the folder to be organized so I can plan with my previous materials first.
This is incredible.
Okay, so perfect. You're teaching again. It says, so what types of materials do you have in there? For example, lessons plan, syllabi, student work, or something else entirely. Probably examples of all that stuff. And I think this is actually the kind of way that what I like about AI, you can talk informally to it.
That's right. And give it unstructured data. You don't have to have all your ducks in a row.
Kind of, sort of by unit.
It's asking how it's organized.
Pretty messy.
And for those of you who are listening and not watching, we'll try to continue to give a play-by-play. But Jason's just going back and forth as Claude basically draws out. Yeah, would it help if I looked at a folder first? It's just, it's trying to get advice. It's trying to find out, It's interesting because you asked it for ideas and suggestions, and it immediately went to questions instead of saying, hey, this is what I suggest.
Yeah, and I will tell you that one of the reasons why that might be the case too is that I'm constantly asking it to interview me to make sure it understands what I'm asking it for. I think we've talked about this in the past, but that's one of my, I called it a prompt side on the Frontier Learning Lab Substack. But the thing that is very important to me is to give it enough context to get the maximum impact out of it.
And that's really a best practice for life, right? Because sometimes we do jump to a conclusion, we assume things, and rather than check for clarity, we jump into it. So it's definitely trying to check as much as it can before it actually makes some changes. So now it's asking, teach this fall, how are you planning to teach? Yeah.
Yep. It looked to my folder. Unit folders are there, but mixed inside of them are different things. Multiple file formats of the same content, PowerPoint, PPTX, and old PPT versions, which is absolutely true. You found me. Root little clutter, syllabi, and rule sheets floating on the top level. Some oddities like the 04 China, 05 Japan mashed together as one folder. Some units, South America, India, Europe, only have empty folders. That's interesting. For planning purposes, you probably want to see, here's the lesson sequence for Africa. Here's what I assigned. Here's the pieces. Here's what my students produced. Next question, when are you planning to teach this fall, and how do you typically work? Do you like to look at one unit at a time or gather all the pieces? Do you prefer breaking things down by type? I am teaching in September, and I typically gather everything for a unit like Africa in one folder and organize from there. And I'm hoping it's going to get to a point where it's going to start taking actions on my behalf. Perfect. That's really helpful. So you want to work through one unit at a time, pulling everything together. Last question, within a unit folder, how do you want things organized? For example, would you prefer by the material type, by topic or lesson? By topic, please.
And like you said, sometimes you have to tell the AI to stop the interview and just like go.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
exactly the case.
because it can ask you forever and
Yeah.
seemingly never get to the work.
Well, and it's funny because so this is my standard prompt for the interview me about things. Please ask me clarifying questions one at a time, providing options if you can until you're at least 98% confident you fully understand my request and deliver a response at a high quality response.
Can you tell this man has done a 1AR, ladies and gentlemen?
I have, yeah. I was the 1A, and so there are times when I'll get 14 questions in, and it's like, listen, I really need you to robot up now, right, and get this rocking and rolling. Perfect. Here, I've got everything I need to propose: a structure, overall structure, root level, keep syllabi, class rules, and other course materials, and course materials or foundations. Each unit folder, Africa, Middle East, etc., organized by lesson topic sequence. Within lessons, subtopics for every material type. Cleanup tasks, consolidate file formats, keep the most recent or useful version, fix the mashup folder, deal with the empty folders. That seems like a great plan to me.
And that's a prompt. What you have just done with the AI is refined your prompt. So
yes.
now that you have this comprehensive prompt, you're gonna pull the trigger and say go, and it's gonna be so much better than if it just tried to do what you typed in the first time as a vague kind of suggestion.
Yep. And so now it's going to start thinking, and it's going to start reorganizing the folder. And you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner is that it's created a little task list for itself. So auditing the folder structure, creating a course level folder, fixing the the 04, 05 China, Japan into separate units, reorganize these unit by topic and structure, handle duplicate files, decide what to do with the sparsely I'm assuming that's as populated folders. Okay, I'm going to start reorganizing. First, let me audit the units, explore. Good, I can now see the landscape. Here are some questions before I start organizing. For empty folders, should I just create placeholder folders? Say placeholder. Looking at content, I see natural topic groups emerging. Are those topics pretty standard across each unit you teach, or does it vary by region? Actually, that's very interesting because it's correct. That's pretty standard. And the root level syllabi and rule files, should those all go into course materials? Yes.
And I'm sure you've run into this, Jason. Sometimes it'll ask me so many questions. I'll be like, whoa, that's overwhelming. Yeah. You need to give those to me one by one, and then I can give you answers. But sometimes when it does that with multiple choice, you can just, answer one, A, 2, B, whatever.
And now it's doing exactly what I asked it, right? So it's starting with that course materials folder, and actually we can watch this play out live.
So what we're seeing a preview, folks, is the robot in your house, like vacuuming your floor and picking stuff up, because it is now, it's still moving, it's doing virtual stuff, but it is moving files and it's doing the kinds of actions digitally that Jason could do himself or another human could do. But what I see in the future is that there's going to be an ambulatory, meaning it can walk robot, that is going to have a set of instructions, and we're going to be able to clarify those. And then it's going to, like Rosie the robot, right? Wasn't that the Jetsons assistant? Servant, okay. Robot servant.
This is a copy of the folder, so I'm just going to say, hey, you make the call.
Yeah, go for it here. And isn't that interesting? Robot up. I like that.
Yeah.
And it's going to learn that stuff too, right? As we use slang, that it's the more I'm using Claude, the more Claude gets to know me, which is both exciting
and terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it's the plus and the minus.
Okay, perfect. I'm making the calls. Let's finish Africa, and now it's working. And you'll also notice here too that it created that course materials document told me about, and so it put all the syllabi in there. Those were at the top level before. Class introduction. It looks like. Oh no, that's actually a module, and it's been working in Africa. And in fact, this is way cleaner. It's already put in things into different.
It's organizing them with numbers. So he's got for those that can't see this, O2 Africa, and then he's got about 9 different modules that are numbered within that folder. So parent folders, child folders, files within.
And
Wow.
that's great. And now that said, like I am using Haiku, which is the cheapest and at least functional model that Anthropic offers through Claude. So I'm not saying it's likely to make mistakes. It's just going to be less accurate than the super duper model called Opus.
And you're paying more to have access to Cowork.
No, I think it just comes with my regular old Pro account.
It does. Okay.
Yeah. Um, but now it's working on the Middle East one, and so we could probably watch it live at this point. Yeah, in fact, it looks like it already did it. So it's renamed all the folders and is now, yeah, and in fact it's going fast now.
So think about this as a department, right? Or just think about yourself keeping all your instructional materials. I'm thinking about myself as we've been using Canvas, being able to download entire Canvas classes. I iterate with my classes as far as the lessons I do and how I structure those. Jason, I've also been thinking about my blog, right? I've been blogging since 2003. I have over 5,000 posts on that. I know back in the early days, you had these tools that would grab your blog post and make a book or whatever. But like being able to have this corpus of writing that I have, I mean, I could, not that anybody would want to read it, but I could write a book with AI
Yeah,
that would trace maybe the thinking, my pedagogical thinking over
yeah,
the course of my career, and it can have direct quotes, but being able to take either loosely organized or completely unorganized, unstructured data, I think is the phrase, being able to take data with a variety of structures. Okay, is it done? It's finished?
it's done. And the part that I love most about this is that you may remember that China and Japan were in the same folder before, and it separated those out into different pieces, so that the China and Japan folder are populated with only China and Japan stuff. And then it asked me what I did. I moved all the root level files into course material, split China and Japan into separate units, organized Africa with topics, applied similar structure to Middle East, created placeholders for sparse units like South America, India, and Europe, archived old and duplicate folders, old PowerPoint formats, template files. They're ready to plan. Open Africa first. All the materials are topped together. You can see what we did. Anything you need tweaking before you start planning. Do a quick index of everything in this folder and create a markdown file with the results. And so basically what I'm going to say is go through and now index everything sitting in these folders, and it'll produce a full table of contents of me of everything that I have.
And for those that may not be familiar with the syntax, can you explain a markdown file?
Yeah, so Markdown is a simplistic way to stylize text documents. So adding things like bold and underline and italics and headers to that. And it's kind of a coder's documentation format.
GitHub uses Markdown.
Yeah, exactly. And I would also say too that it's already done. No.
View your index. Open in iWriter Pro. Wow.
Oh, wow.
So what Jason's scrolling through is a comprehensive index of his entire folder organized into modules and subfolders with notes for planning and wow.
That's wild, right?
And again, we could think about supplementing this, just as you've talked about with your World War I, project. You pull in these other open source materials. I was talking to a teacher today about how important I think it is that we embrace open licensing and open sharing of curricular materials, because as we can legally, which we always want to encourage here on the EdTech Situation Room, as we legally access, materials and then have a chance to bring those in, Jason has all of his stuff, but that can then be supplemented with stuff from other open source, open content materials, textbooks.
Yeah, totally. And and I even think about, as a matter of fact, couple of years back, actually a lot of years back, maybe a decade or so ago, there was the Washington State Open Course Project where they created open access materials for, it was like 150 100 level college courses, and just made it available for download. Well, one of the things I'm thinking about right now is that if we were using those materials as the foundation for like a dual credit course, for example, that's so different now, because I can stick this into Cowork and say, I want you to organize these materials, make me an index of every file in here. And then I also want you to give me a sense of the depth and the quality of it, right? And maybe give it some things to judge. And, that's going to be a little more compute intensive to do that. But imagine for a moment, how wild that will be. And, I talked about this a little bit last week when we were talking about OpenClaw, but the thing that is coming relatively soon, I think, to our data lives, is that there can be an agent in the background that is doing the hard work of the stuff that is not particularly instructional, right?
Or maybe the laborious work, the repetitive work, the grunt work, maybe.
Yeah, class field trip notes, tracking over time, students whose grades are dropping, but you haven't heard from a parent lately, so you need to reach out. Like tracking all those subtle pieces that can give you the data you need to be as successful as possible. I think is a really critical part of kind of being smart in this era. But yeah, a really wild stuff for sure.
Let's hit a couple more articles, and I think we better geek of the week it, because we're almost at the top of the hour. This is a blog, I guess. It's a Canadian blog. Maybe it's a news site. I don't know. It's called The White Hatter. Should I should I have a Gemini gem that I automatically throw my links into, which tells me about my sources? Yes, I probably should. The name of the post from 2 days ago is when connection is engineered, understanding the anatomy of an AI-powered romance scam. And, scams, and this is because Valentine's Day is coming up. There are so many different kinds of scams. And I haven't watched I didn't watch the Super Bowl live, and I have not watched all the Super Bowl ads. But there were some references to, dating sites and things. And there are just all kinds of ways in which folks can be scammed. And so I thought this was an instructive article. And I think that, talking about scams and social engineering and the ways in which we can try and inoculate ourselves, our family members, our students to these kind of things is important. And I put that under the bad actors subtitle for AI. And then another one, this is from United 24 Media, which again, I guess maybe I need to just make sure I vetted the source before I even put the link in. The headline says, pro-Russian narratives target Wikipedia, making a dangerous trend for AI chatbot data. And what this article points out is that so many of the LLMs, the language models, are using Wikipedia as a basis for the presentation of facts. This is part of why Elon and company have created Grokpedia, because they, want to have a different set of facts for different events and people. And so this gives specifics about the ways in which, as they call it, Russian-aligned groups have been operating to basically try and change, different things that are in the Wikipedia, whether it is stuff about early Soviet history, a lot about, Eastern Europe, things that are going to basically rewrite them. Well, I'll read from the article. According to Estonian journalist Ronald Levy, over 600 profiles of figures born between 1940 and 1991, including Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, have been edited on the English Wikipedia. They were previously listed as being born in Estonia, but now they're listed as being born in the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. So it's not even new colonialism, but in the same way that a colonial power or an empire would claim land, these Russian-aligned individuals, groups, and bots are rewriting Wikipedia articles to try and change history. And, I know Jason, as a historian and a social studies teacher, I mean, this is really alarming. And while you and I may not be as focused on Estonian history and significant characters in Estonian history, you can be sure that the folks in Estonia are focused on that. And this isn't just happening in Estonia, and it's happening at scale. And AI and these bots and Cowork and all of this is just going to accelerate the process. So the heroic Wikipedians are facing some real big challenges, and I know that they're rising to the occasion, but we need to rise to the occasion as well as teachers and recognize that, yes, this information war is happening and truth is on the line. And part of what we need to do is develop the literacy skills to be able to vet these things and try and determine what it is we're going to believe and what is actually happening.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And it's just making. I mean, there's never only been one history. There's been many versions of history, and in fact, something I'm becoming even more conscious of is how important it is to, encourage students to understand that there is no, one way to describe any historical event. But, I'm still bemoaning the loss of social studies instruction due to No Child Left Behind 25 years ago. There's ample evidence that diminished our students' ability to think historically because it was not given its due focus, especially in K-8 classrooms. But we need to keep pushing to expand. How we're encouraging students to tackle issues because it's not going to get any easier for them as adults.
Basically, folks, we all need to embrace more of the pedagogy of the cross-examination debate classroom.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Actually, that's absolutely true. And shout out to Stephen Bouchard, who I'm sure is not listening to the podcast, but he's been pushing really hard on LinkedIn about the importance of debate and that every student should have access to that kind of instruction. And I believe that this podcast would endorse that very notion because I think it's an important part of thinking about it in a nuanced way.
And we should probably even include that link. All right. Will you tell us about your Geek of the Week open work, sir?
Yes. I just wanted to say that co-work is great, but there is a growing number of alternatives to it in the open source world. And this is really varsity level nerd, right? Like I wouldn't do this necessarily myself. Or I'm sorry, I wouldn't recommend doing this yourself unless you have a little bit of technical background. But this is one example of software suites released in the last 4 weeks as open source software that do similar things to co-work. And so I've seen dozens of these pop up. This one looked interesting as I moved through the GitHubs for all these sites. But what I really like about this is that you can use a local model. Like we've talked about Olama in the past, it allows you to download a model to your machine, which is something you can do really easily on an M something Mac, right? More RAM is really useful there. But I do think that a lot of this functionality, especially the how am I going to organize these files or create an index for you or telling you what's in a folder. Like I think this will increasingly be available on your local machine. This is an example.
I can see this moving into the Minority Report realm where the more that the AIs get to know us, the more the AIs will be able to anticipate and guess, well, what would you like to do today, Jason, given these milestones and these projects? In a day not too distant, you're going to wake up and you're going to say, hi, AI open work bot. And it'll say, hi, Jason, as you've been sleeping, I know that you're working on these projects and I've already done this, this, and this. And
now, right? In fact, it's funny you should mention that, Wes, because I did get OpenClaw working for 20 more minutes the other day just to play with it. And it's in a virtual machine, right? So I don't. It's not like I'm running it on a desktop. It's in an Ubuntu Linux desktop on my Mac. It's my Mac laptop even. But I did get it working again, and I was prompting it through Slack. Is I hooked it up to a Slack channel. So I was prompting it through Slack, and just to give you a sense of that, I did try out one of my kind of standard prompts to get the response back to it. And I can't remember which LLM I hooked it up to, but it's probably ChatGPT. And I asked it for a pretty complex thing. So it said, great, I'll get right on that. Well, I'm used to ChatGPT telling me it'll get right on that and it doesn't do anything. Well, that's where OpenClaw is different because it's an agent. So it was working on it. So I asked 20 minutes later, said, nope, not done yet. And then finally, it pinged me back and said, oh, I'm complete with that project. And I downloaded a 47-page response it gave me because it spent a lot of time on it. It also cost me like $4 an API, I think, a usage, but I don't think that we're that far from that future.
Wow. Amazing. All right. Well, my geeks of the week, I'll do a fun one first. Have you had success with humor and AI? This is freaking amazing. So Lucy Gray, who is up in Chicagoland, is going to do a webinar for the Media Education Lab next month on the 2nd of March. It's going to be the first Monday, and it's going to be called Media Literacy for Seniors. So I actually made the prompt, and this is my first geek of the week. Use a tool to create your prompt. Claude created the prompt for me. Gemini Nano Banana created this. And so this is about the digital divide for seniors. And for those of you that can't see it, by the way, it said signed by Larson or whatever. And I was like, I have to change that because, you know, the Far Side author is and cartoonist and illustrator is dead. But this is his style. So in the front left, there's an older gentleman who's watching a screen that says deep fake Abraham Lincoln TikTok. And he's got a little sticky note there that says Control-Alt-Delete. The lady here on the right says, you won, click now or else. Lucy, because I used a picture, a recent profile of her is teaching there, and the title of the webinar is how to turn it on. The fellow in the back left says, you know, password must include hieroglyphics. And then the person, actually they have 3 arms. I didn't notice that. They're on a computer that says multi-factor authentication, scan retina and sing national anthem. And so anyway, I'm a big fan of the Far Side. And one of the things that I've heard, you know, is that AI can't tell a joke or it can't do humor. And so this is this week, and and I've got the prompt. I think if you go to the actual image below, this is the name. I need to put the link to the webinar. But anyway, I've got this archived as far as what that link was. So that was just wild.
By the way, one quick correction: Gary Larson is still alive.
Is he?
In fact, because he retired from it because he got tired of it.
I thought he died.
And in 2019, he actually started drawing again because he bought an iPad with a pen, and he said it was the most joy he'd had drawing in a long time. Yeah, it was really great, and I believe that the farside.com is owned by him and occasionally pops up new cartoons.
Well, thank you so much for that important fact check. Wow. All right, and I'll do this one quick. This is my Claude created Super Bowl ad resource. So I do teach media literacy. I love using the Super Bowl ads. If you go to the About page, of course, here's my little infographic created by Gemini. Basically, this is a spreadsheet of what Claude felt were the 20 most appropriate ads to use for middle schoolers. And so it has the name, it has the link, which I did have to go in and fix some of the links, but it has some media literacy analysis as far as techniques that they use to try to persuade. It has an estimation rating of highly recommended or recommended with context. There are teaching notes that it has with this. And then I listed the ones that said preview first. I thought, well, we're not going to put these on the front page. But anyway, this was a pretty quickly generated resource. And actually, as a technique, what I'll do is I will select all these. Maybe we'll go down to 21. And I don't know if you use the wheel of names, Jason. I'm probably going to create my own vibe coded one that lets me save, but it's a random number picker. And so I can put these in here and spin, and we can say, hey, which one of these should we see today? You can have hyperlinks in here, so it's actually clickable. But hey, let's look at number 13, which is the Pepsi ad. And anyway, it's just a way to kind of randomize it. And I do that with student names sometimes too.
That's super cool. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, well, we have gone 8 minutes over. Jason, when you're not here on the show, where can folks find you?
Best place to find me is actually LinkedIn or my website, aicentrist.com. And it's my pleasure to announce that next week I'll be at the Digital Learning Annual Conference where I am on the keynote panel. So I'll be opening up that conference in fabulous Sacramento, California. And to all my online learning friends and colleagues from across the United States, I hope to see you there.
Fantastic. Does that mean we'll be off next week for the show?
Likely, yeah.
Yeah, likely. Okay. And if there's a hashtag, you'll have to share that.
Yeah.
Because it would be nice to follow that. So, well, I am at westfryer.com. I have a variety of places where I share, but this has been the EdTech Situation Room, our almost every week on Wednesday nights podcast and web show where we are breaking down the technology news, pushing it through an educational lens, and basically finding opportunities to rant and evangelize the things that we believe in and we think you should do. And a lot of that's about AI. So we encourage you to share the show, rate us, I guess. We never say that, but hey, it helps. And follow us on Facebook, people. If we do, we'll be able to broadcast again live. I think we're up to like 60 or something. So anyway, once you hit 100, unless Facebook changes it again. So yeah, please follow us, our page, EdTechSR on Facebook. But we hope you stay savvy, stay safe, avoid the scams, keep vetting your information, and we'll see you next time here on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.
Good night.